Okay, I think we'll start now. So I'm going to mute my mic, but the floor is yours.
Okay, thanks. Well, this is a bit strange because I don't see all of you guys, but I'll just keep talking, and I think there will be some few minutes for questions afterwards. Just tell me if you don't hear me anymore or something. Try to send me a message about that. So I'm working at the Kemikaliecentrum at the Environment and Health Administration in the city of Stockholm, Sweden. So this is the municipality of Stockholm. And we have about just about 1,000 preschools in total, which roughly half are run by the municipality. But of course we also want to reach the privately owned preschools. So I've been working with this for about 4 years now. We started the Chemicalsmart preschool initiative in 2014-15. So Sweden has 16 national environmental goals, and one of them concerns the human health and the environment, which should not be exposed to harmful chemicals. And here we mean chemicals which are industrially produced or enriched, like lead, which we've been hearing about before. So the intention of this goal is to reduce this exposure to harmful chemicals, which we heard a lot about this morning. So that those presentations prove a very good foundation for what I'm going to talk about now. This national goal comes from the fact that we have a lot of items, products, articles around us in our everyday environment, and especially in the indoor environment. Everything that surrounds us has chemicals in it, whether intentional or unintentional, but a lot is produced in factories nowadays with many different chemicals. And the annual production of chemicals worldwide is steadily increasing. As we heard before, in the 40s, this production started to increase, and in the 50s we were at 7 million tons annually, while in the year 2000 we were closing on 400 million tons annually, a dramatic increase for only 50 years, and now, soon 20 years later, we're at 1,000 million tons annually. That's 1 billion tons per year produced in the world. And of course, not every chemical is dangerous out of these, but it's it's also a high number of chemicals within these 1,000 million tons. And this, of course, gives an increased living standard. We have all of those products we saw on the pictures in the previous presentations, like laundry machines, microwave ovens. We have a lot of furniture which we can easily buy at cheap prices nowadays, clothes and toys and so on. So we get a lot of convenience, but we also pay because this increased consumption yields increased use of chemicals. And some of these are harmful to both our bodies and the rest of the environment. So due to these things, and that this national environmental goal is supposed to seep into the public sector's activities, the City of Stockholm has a chemical action plan from 2014 to 2019, and this year we're developing the new one, which is going to start from next year. And within this chemical action plan, the children's everyday environment is prioritized, or those in the population which are more sensitive. And as we heard in the previous presentation, children are more sensitive to exposure to these types of chemicals. And this was explained earlier, but there is also one more factor, that kids spend a lot of time on the floor, and on the floor there is dust usually, depending on how good the cleaning services work. But kids get this dust on their hands, and they often lick their fingers and use things in another way than adults do. So they put both their hands and in their mouth. Let's see what happened now. And get this dust into their system, and the dust is known to contain a lot of the chemicals which are emitted from things in our environment. So children are more sensitive due to the facts we heard about before, and it's not only the sex hormones, it's also, as we heard, the thyroid hormones, and also hormones adjusting the fat uptake into the cells, and also, of course, insulin, and there are other hormone systems which can be affected by this exposure. This, of course, is a long-term toxicity. It's not like you eat a bit of dust one day and then you get sick the next day. It's the long-term exposure from fetal stages and in young ages and up to adulthood, which might give health effects later in life. So, in order to work with the preschools and try to phase out items, products and materials which can contain harmful chemicals, we developed a guidance document for a Chemicalsmart preschool. At the end of this presentation there will be links for all of our materials. And the level 1 out of this document contains actions where there is a high risk but a low cost, and thus giving a large effect. For example, removing old toys and chemical products which are not in use but pose a risk just by being in the facility. And level 2 has still a high risk but might imply a higher cost and might be harder to implement. For example, exchanging all the kitchen utensils or all the resting mattresses. A level 3 might have a lower risk or a low grade of opportunity to decide without involving other entities, such as exchanging the whole flooring material, exchanging the outdoor equipment like the playground equipment, if having such at the preschool. So I will not include level 3 in this presentation, but the guidance document has these 3 levels in order to be a bit more easy to understand, and it's also easy to understand where to start, where we have the highest risks and the largest effects. Now I'm going to give 2 examples from each of these first 2 levels of the guidance document. And it starts with the disposal of items which are used as toys but are not toys, or old toys which do not fulfill the current toy safety legislation. What we've seen when visiting preschools is that a lot of electronic equipment is used as toys. For example, keyboards, old cell phones, cameras, maybe building materials, keys, receipts and such. And all of these are of course not tested for use by children. They're made for grown-ups, they're not used, they're not supposed to be used for chewing on and so on, and they have, give risk of emissions of hazardous substances to the children using them. You see some examples on this picture. And then the old toys are not compliant with the new Toy Safety Directive and may thus contain those harmful phthalates and so on. So old soft plastic should be removed. And then we're also doing some good examples of new toys from the procured assortment. As we heard in the previous presentation, procurement is important, so we have good things to buy instead. And also think about, do we need all of these items which we had in the preschool? Might have accumulated for like 20 years and we don't need all of these plastic toys. But then there are good examples like wooden toys, textile toys which can be washed in the laundry machine, and also swan-labeled plastic toys. For example, these colorful kitchen sets to the left here, which have the swan label. Chemical products is also on level 1, and they should of course be kept out of reach of children, and one should keep a chemicals inventory, and we have an online system for that where we can also see if there are any harmful substances in the chemicals used. So you register it in a system, and then the system tells you if you should phase out that product. Yes, this is a very bad example of storage of a dishwasher detergent. So such things are noticed sometimes when we visit the preschools and when the inspectors visit the preschools. So we can give information that this is not according to regulations. On level 2, we have the use of other materials than plastic in contact with food, not to have this transfer of substances from the food contact material to the food which the children and the staff, of course, eat. And here it's advisable to choose alternatives to plastic, and there is something called glass porcelaina, which is still light, because that might be a problem with porcelaina that is too heavy for the staff to lift, like many plates and so on. So there are other examples there which can be used and which are very good in the chemical perspective too. Yes, and when applying heat, the risk of transfer of substances from plastic materials to the food increases. On level 2, we also have the exchange of resting mattresses, and now there is also a Swan-labeled resting mattress, which don't have these flame retardants in the foam core, because the foam is produced in a better way, not needing those types of added chemicals, but the material itself is more resistant to fire. And there are, of course, other examples too, which the picture in the middle has this more of a bed type of thing, which doesn't have a mattress, but it's just a fabric which the children can sleep on. The young ones which still sleep in daytime. So those were some of the advices we give to the preschools and the parts of this guidance document. And now I'm going to talk a bit about the calculations on phased out hazardous substances and how we follow this up by dust sampling. So we had a project which was called Non-Haz City, in which we had extra funding compared to our normal situation. So we could do both sampling of articles and materials from preschools and from the procured assortment, as well as measuring the content of these chemicals in the dust in preschools. So we went to 7 preschools to collect old articles and materials, and we went to first 100 preschools and collected dust in 2015, and then a second round of 20 preschools which had done both level 1 and 2 in the guidance document now in 2018. So here are some examples of the toys which we analyzed, and these are old toys which we got from the preschools visited. And if it has a green frame, then it's okay according to today's legislation. It's still often made from this PVC, polyvinyl chloride plastic, which historically had contained those harmful phthalates, but then those plasticizers have been exchanged for other substances lately. So the green ones are okay according to today's legislation, although they might be they're older usually. And it's very hard to know how old. On some it says a date or a year underneath of production, but on most there is no such information. But the ones with yellow frames, they had hazardous content and would not be allowed to be sold today as toys. And this lizard in the top mid had 42% of DHP, which is a very well-known hormonal disrupting phthalates or endocrine disrupting phthalates. Yes, and this is the new materials or the new articles from the per assortment. And it's the same, the green frames are okay, and as you see there are many more green frames, and we found some articles which had hazardous substance content. These levels were usually very much lower, or always very much lower than this 42% in the lizard. And in the mattress here in the middle, we had a flame retardant, and the company rapidly withdrew 1,700 mattresses which were going to customers, and then they exchanged the foam production technology to remove those. flame retardants, because of course this company doesn't want to sell such things to the preschool, so they are very positive actually to our finding these things, although it implies a cost for them. So everything which had a problem here was adjusted. And in total, for the old items, the top graph, close to half of the items we got from the preschools contained hazardous substances which are regulated nowadays. It would not be allowed to be sold as toys or child care articles today. And only 16% were totally fine. We had somewhere in between there where we found target substances but below the restricted levels of today. And for the new items, it's virtually the opposite, like half of the articles were totally free of the substances we looked for. 6%, that's only 3 articles, had content above restricted level, and here it's one of the restricted levels is from Ecotext, environmental label, or eco label, and the other 2 REACH legislation. Yes. And we also have a lot of traces here too, like substances below the restricted level. That might be contamination from other production and so on. It's not intentional because it's not at functional levels. And below restricted level is usually 0.1%, but it differs a bit from substance to substance and which legislation that's regulating the substance. Then we did calculations on the hazardous substance reduction because we know that we phased out a lot of material between 2015 and 18. So close to 10,000 resting mattresses were exchanged and tons of phthalates were phased out due to this. Hundreds of kilos of one type of flame retardants. We didn't find the usual PBB and PBD brominated flame retardants, but these organophosphorus flame retardants in the mattresses, the old mattresses. And then we also exchanged toys, or the preschools exchanged the toys, animals and figurines, what we calculated here. We didn't calculate dolls and balls, but more of these, like the lizard type of items. And from exchanging these toys, hundreds of kilos of phthalates were phased back. And I usually think about this comparison to a chemical product. If these 2 toys would be a chemical product, they would need the labeling, and that label would be like a real health hazard. No one would buy a toy with that symbol, so it's good to see that the legislation works and that the new toys are free of these substances. To sum it up, here's a table for the calculations of phased out. So we got the statistics from our purchasing system and from the city units, which buys mattresses and toys. And calculations based on this 10,000 mattresses approximately gives 2 tons of phthalates, which were phased out from the Stockholm city preschools. And over 200 kilos of flame retardants, and from toys we have about 170 kilos of phthalates, and a bit of chlorinated paraffins were also phased out. So this is all written down in a report for hazardous substance reduction to phase out of old articles and materials in preschools. This is available both on the homepage I will show later and on the non-HASC City webpage. So is a quick part about the dust analysis. Samples were collected before and after phase out of all toys and mattresses, and more things, of course, materials which should be exchanged according to the guidance document. So we went to 100 preschools in 2015 and 20 preschools in 2018. So these preschools which were selected for the second round of dust sampling, they had a questionnaire and were selected depending on if they did levels 1 and 2 out of the guidance document. We want to guess what happened to the dust levels. We thought that this period would be too short and that we wouldn't have done enough. We haven't exchanged the flooring material and so on. But we actually found a lot of reduction. So this is a graph showing the change in percentages minus towards the left and plus towards the right. So when the substance decreased in concentration, it's towards the left, and if it increased, it's towards the right. So what we saw was a lot of the legislated substances did actually decrease by doing this phase out of old materials, while some of the new ones like BPS, the black bar, and TBEP, the red bar, increased significantly. Which means that, you phase out something and phase in something else. And these new substances sort of are less examined, or there's less research on those. So we don't know as much as we do about the ones which are now legislated when it comes to human health and environmental effects. But it's very positive to see that these actions directed at removing these hazardous substances actually worked. So that was, we were very happy to see these results. And here is the guidance document for Chemicalsmart preschool. It's available in Swedish, while this other report I talked about before is in English. So everything is free for download. This is a PDF at the homepage. We also have good examples. The good examples are a collection of examples from preschools which have worked a lot with this guidance document, and we want to share this to other preschools which can take after the good work and so on. We have lists with recommended items from the preferred assortment, which are a bit under construction at the moment, but due to changes in procured assortments. We have web-based educational material for open access. It's also in Swedish, but everyone can use it, and everything is found here. Let's see if this works. Yes. So this is our web page for the preschools. And here we have the web-based educational material. Let's see. Here at the top. We also have open lectures and one recorded lecture here with me talking again. And then we have the analysis of preschool materials, and here also have an English version, hazardous substances in articles and materials. And then we have the dust analysis. The guidance document is called Vägledning, and the good examples here. It has a lot of pictures, this good example, so it might be useful even though not speaking or reading Swedish. And then these tips and hints for buying the right things from the assortments. I will briefly show you this web-based education. Let's do this. And here is the open version, where whomever can have a look. And these are the different rooms of the preschool: toys room or playroom, creation, kitchen, bathroom, and so on. So for each of these rooms, there is a question to discuss. How many plastic items do you have in your toys room or in your playroom? And then you choose like none or very many, and a bit of information about plastic. I have an introductory film about chemicals in toys, and also about different substances, about phthalates and so on. And then things to keep track of, like wooden toys can have heavy metals in the paint if they're old. This is regulated nowadays, but exchange the old ones. Soft plastic toys can be made out of PVC and contain phthalates, and also heavy metals sometimes in the old material. So that was it.
Yeah,
and
thank you.
For the attention. And here is the Non-Has City webpage too.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. And we will have an opportunity for one or two questions because you're not going to be on the panel, of course. So if there is a question from the audience, this was very interesting and interesting to see that this was made a difference to anyone who has a burning question. Yes? No, you can.
Kveikt á þeim, eða hana? Hérna, á leikskólum þá oft könnunarleikur til dæmis, þar sem verið að leika með lykla og keðjur, dollur úr plasti og ýmislegt. Hvað þá þurfum við væntanlega þá bara að taka það út, en hægt að setja einhver önnur, annan efni við í staðinn fyrir þetta í könnunarleik?
Í könnun þá ertu að meina hérna.
Þá þetta leikur sem með verðlausum efni við.
Með?
Verðlausum efni við.
Yeah, okay. So just some stuff that they bring to the school. Or
yeah,
she's asking if because the children are often playing with things that they just sort of bring with them and or
keys and chains
and stuff, that comes from not something that the preschool buys or has, but
usually it's things that
bring it sometimes.
So parents or staff will bring
with them all kinds of stuff.
Homes.
Yeah, well, according to our guidance document, it shouldn't accept such things. And we also have a list of, recommended materials or things which you can actually reuse. Do you still see the web page?
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see. Återanvändning, that's like reuse of things.
Okay.
So I made this document for the preschools. At the preschool, you should only use safe materials, and you can accept this, like textiles and fabric which doesn't have flame retardants and so on. And then be careful with some things, like CD records should not be played with or chewed on, building materials and so on. And don't accept like insulation, building materials which are for insulating purposes, garden hoses from PVC plastic, keys and other unknown metal composition, items with unknown metal compositions, and so on, cashier receipts, electronics. So our advice to the preschools is not to accept these things for play, but there are some things which can readily be accepted.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that's very interesting.
Thank you.
Yeah. Couple of more questions, and then we wrap up.
Yes, Paul Bo Larsen. Did you measure the level of lead in the dust in the institution as well?
Did you hear the?
I didn't hear.
Oh, yes, consider.
If you measured the levels of lead in the dust samples.
Not in this round. We were more interested in these organic chemicals. We measured lead in some of the old items and found it in some old toys and in some mattress covers. I think it's a stabilizer for the PVC plastic.
Mm-hmm. And Anders?
Anders, Västergötland. I don't have the details now, but we had some problems where they bought wooden toys, very nice wooden toys, but they were painted with different kind of colors. And when I tried to disinfect them, we said I have to do that according to routines. These paintings disappeared actually. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you had that problem as well.
Did you hear that on painted wooden toys?
Can you repeat a bit the question?
they had problems with the painted wooden toys, and then the paint disappeared. You mean that the kids are, of course...
No, it disappears when they disinfect the toys.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, that the paint of the wooden toy disappears and probably into the kids. Is that...
No, not necessarily.
No, not necessarily in the kids. When they disinfect the toys.
Disinfected the toys.
Ah, okay. Yeah, I don't think they do that much. The preschools, that's more a hospital thing, I think, because things are usually very dirty. But so I've been suggesting that they should bathe their toys sometimes. Like have this as a happening, like the kids get to bathe the dinosaurs. But that's more for the plastic ones maybe. But yes, from the wooden ones, the paint sometimes peels off.
Yeah.
That happens. But I don't know how much of wooden toys the Stockholm preschools have started to use. So I don't know if it's a problem yet. One more thing we would like to follow up on is like, what did they actually buy instead? Is there someone who exchanged all the plastic for wood, and how does this work? Mm-hmm. We know that the wooden toys are bought, but we don't know the function yet.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. I think we have to wrap up here, Ann Lagerqvist, and move to the next and the final speaker in this session. Are you gonna?
I can fix everything.
Okay, you're gonna fix everything.
Thank you so much. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you.